He said I was his life, watched every tear fall, but never tried to catch one. And that's when I realized I was just his entertainment. But you know what the cruelest part is? I didn't see it coming. Because when he walked into my life, I didn't see a mask. I saw a man who made the world quiet, even if just for a moment. And when you're used to screaming inside your own head every single day, silence feels like salvation. I met Daniel during one of the darkest winters of my life. The sky was always gray, and it felt like even the air had stopped believing in new beginnings. I was working late hours at a small art cafe downtown, pouring coffee for strangers who never looked me in the eye, scraping together rent, pretending my dreams didn't ache every time I ignored them. My world was small, tired, and fragile. I wasn't looking for anyone. I didn't want anyone. I had enough damage inside me to sink a ship, and I didn't want to be someone else's burden. But then Daniel walked in. He wasn't loud or arrogant. No grand gestures. He was quiet, confident, and steady in a way that made me forget how unstable my own life was. He ordered chamomile tea and asked me what book I was reading. Simple, innocent, but something in his eyes told me he noticed more than he let on. We talked. Once, then again, then every day. It didn't take long before his voice became a part of my routine. Before I started waiting for him without admitting it to myself. Before I found myself laughing again, real, belly deep laughter that I thought had died in me years ago. He listened. Not just the polite kind of listening people do when they're waiting for their turn to speak. No, he listened like every word I said was a piece of a puzzle he genuinely wanted to solve. He noticed things no one else did. How I twisted the ring on my middle finger when I was anxious. How I avoided eye contact when I talked about my childhood. How I smiled too fast, like I was afraid of being caught not smiling. One night, I broke down in front of him. No filter, no performance. Just me, messy, crying, shaking, confessing things I had locked up so tightly they barely had names anymore. My mother's slow death. My father's empty house. The men who took advantage of my kindness and left me emptier each time. I expected him to walk away. Instead, he pulled me close and whispered, "I don't want the polished version of you. I want this, your raw, real truth. That's the part of you I love most." And right there, I gave him everything. My trust. My heart. My secrets. He told me he was falling in love with me, and I believed it. He looked into my eyes and said, "You're my entire world." I remember that moment so vividly. We were standing on the rooftop of my building, stars barely visible through the city lights, and I felt safe. Safe. Do you know how dangerous that word is when it's an illusion? I thought he was building a home in my soul. I didn't realize he was collecting bricks only to crush me with them later. Because slowly, subtly, things started to shift. At first, it was little things. He stopped asking how I was. Or if he did, it felt mechanical, like checking a box. He'd zone out when I talked about my day. He'd say, "You're being too sensitive," whenever I expressed hurt. The warmth in his eyes, it faded, replaced with a cold indifference I couldn't name. But every time I questioned it, he'd turn on the charm again. "I've just been stressed. You know I love you, right? You're overthinking. Don't let your past ruin this." And I would nod. I would swallow my doubts and apologize for feeling too much. Because when someone once held you like you were the only thing keeping them grounded, it's hard to believe they could ever stop caring. But they can. He did. It was like living with two Daniels. One was the man who used to send me morning voice notes and tuck my hair behind my ear while whispering how beautiful I looked without makeup. The other, he barely noticed when I cried in the bathroom at 2 a.m., muffling my sobs into a towel. And yet, I stayed. I stayed because I remembered the man he used to be. I stayed because I thought I was breaking him too. I stayed because I was more afraid of losing what little love I had left than admitting it was already gone. And that's when it hit me. One night, I stood in front of the mirror, mascara smeared under my eyes, a long scratch on my arm from where I'd dropped a shattered plate in the kitchen during another one of his silent treatments. I looked at myself and whispered, "Why won't he help me?" And I heard the answer in my own voice. Because he never came to heal me. He came to watch me fall. That realization broke me in a way he never could. He watched every tear fall. And not once did he try to catch one. Because they weren't inconvenient to him. They were entertainment. He loved the drama of my healing. The thrill of being needed. The ego trip of being the hero in a story he had no intention of finishing. And suddenly, I saw him for what he was. Not a savior. Not a partner. Just a man who liked broken things because they made him feel whole. But not anymore. Because if pain was a game to him, I was about to teach him what it meant to lose everything. You don't notice betrayal all at once. It doesn't kick down your door in the middle of the night. It slips in quietly, like a draft under a locked window. A slow chill you ignore. Until it freezes you. That's what loving Daniel became. One moment, he was finishing my sentences, holding my hand like it was sacred. The next, he was distracted, irritated, impatient with my pain, as if he'd grown tired of the very thing he once claimed made me beautiful. I kept trying to explain away the changes. He was tired. Work was stressful. Maybe I was expecting too much. But deep down, I knew. Something had shifted. He stopped coming home on time. Or when he did, he smelled different, like unfamiliar cologne and guilt. I noticed the way he kept his phone face down, the way he jumped when it buzzed. How he always left the room to answer certain calls. I remember the first night I asked him directly, "Is there someone else?" His expression didn't even flicker. He just laughed. Laughed. "Are you serious?" he said, smirking. "You're being dramatic again." Dramatic. That word dug into me like a thorn. I wasn't being dramatic. I was being gut-aware. Women know. We always know. Our hearts whisper truths before our brains dare catch up. And my heart was screaming. Still, I let it go. Not because I believed him, but because I wasn't ready to face the truth. The man who once held my broken pieces with reverence was now the one throwing them against the wall. Then came the party. Our mutual friend Nina was turning 30, and we were invited to her rooftop celebration. I hadn't seen Daniel excited about anything in weeks, but suddenly he was shaving, spraying cologne, choosing outfits like he cared. I thought maybe, just maybe, he wanted to reconnect. He didn't. He wanted her. Her name was Ava. I remember her clearly, tight red dress, smoky voice, fake laugh that made my skin crawl. She clung to Daniel's arm the moment we arrived. At first, I thought it was a coincidence. Maybe she was just overly friendly. Until I saw the way he looked at her. Not with guilt. Not with discomfort. With ownership. Like she was his. And I, standing a few feet away in the dress he once said made me look like poetry, was invisible. He barely spoke to me the entire night. When he did, it was cold, clipped, condescending. "You okay?" I asked quietly as we stood by the bar. He rolled his eyes. "Can we not do this right now?" That's when I knew. Not suspected. Knew. She wasn't just a momentary distraction. She was my replacement. And the worst part? He wanted me to see it. He wanted me to feel small. To feel crazy. To doubt every word, every touch, every late night confession he'd ever made. He didn't want to walk away. He wanted me to crumble. Because some men don't just leave. They erode you. Piece by piece. When we got home that night, I didn't speak. I showered in silence, tears mixing with hot water. And when I came out, I found him on the couch, scrolling through his phone like I didn't exist. "I saw the way you looked at her," I whispered. He didn't even glance up. "She's just a friend." "You're lying." His eyes finally met mine, and there was no remorse, just coldness. "Maybe if you weren't always so sad, I wouldn't need other people to feel human." That sentence. That one sentence. cut deeper than every betrayal combined. Because it wasn't just a confession, it was blame. He made my pain the reason for his cheating. He turned himself into the victim of my survival. And in that moment, something inside me snapped. Not with fire, not with rage, but with ice. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just nodded. Okay. That was all I said. Because I knew then, it wasn't just about him cheating. It was about power. He fed off watching me unravel. He wanted a front row seat to the collapse he helped create. But I wouldn't give him the show. No, I would give him something else instead. A finale he'd never forget. Because if he thought I was going to fall apart quietly, if he thought I'd disappear like another forgettable chapter in his drama-filled life, he had no idea who I really was. He thought he was writing my story, but I was already planning his ending. After that night, everything inside me went still. You'd think betrayal would ignite fire, rage, screams, broken plates, but not for me. I didn't burn. I froze. It's a strange kind of death. The one that happens when someone convinces you that your sadness makes you unlovable, that your vulnerability is a flaw, that your pain, the thing they once claimed made you real, is now a burden they resent. Daniel had turned my entire heart into a spectacle, and I had been the only one in the audience who didn't know I was being watched. Every "I love you" replayed in my head now like a twisted joke. Every time he called me, his world felt like a performance I had unknowingly auditioned for. He didn't love me. He loved the way I needed him. And when I started healing, even just a little, when I started needing less, he pulled the rug out from under me. That's what men like Daniel do. They chase the broken girl like a hero with a savior complex. But the moment she stands up on her own, they punish her for it. The next few days after the party were unbearable. We barely spoke. I moved around the apartment like a ghost. He didn't bother hiding his phone anymore. He stayed out later, came home smelling like a different kind of guilt. The silence between us wasn't empty, it was heavy, like a room filling slowly with smoke. One night, I found one of her earrings in his jacket pocket. Delicate. Red. Not mine. I held it between my fingers and didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stared at it and whispered, "This is the last time." Not the last time he would lie. Not the last time he would cheat. The last time I would allow it. The next morning, I woke up before him. I watched him sleep, peacefully, smugly, like he hadn't wrecked me just days before. And then I looked in the mirror. My reflection didn't scare me anymore. She looked tired, yes. Worn, weathered, but not weak. Something else had taken root behind my eyes. Not sadness. Not desperation. Clarity. And with clarity came a plan. I didn't want him to suffer the way I had. I wanted something worse. I wanted him to know, to truly know, what it felt like to lose something he thought he owned. To watch his control, his ego, his power slip from his hands, slowly, painfully, like grains of sand through trembling fingers. But before revenge, there had to be silence. Stillness. Patience. So I gave him what he expected. I played along. I stopped asking questions. I smiled when he lied. I even made him dinner one night, his favorite, just to watch his eyebrows twitch in confusion. He didn't know I had started documenting everything. Every lie. Every voicemail. Every late night call he thought I didn't hear. Every bank transaction. Every receipt. Every subtle manipulation he had so expertly mastered over the months. I wasn't just gathering proof. I was building a case. And not just for the world. For me. Because when you've been gaslit long enough, you start to question your own memory. You start to believe maybe you were the problem all along. I needed evidence, not just of his betrayal, but of my sanity. Meanwhile, he got comfortable again. Men like Daniel always do. Once they think you've given up, they relax. They let their guard down. They start making mistakes. And God, did he make a big one? It was a Sunday morning when I found the video. He left his laptop open in the kitchen while he showered. I wasn't even snooping. I was just grabbing a glass of water when I noticed the screen. And there it was. A folder titled Memories. At first, I thought maybe it was old videos of us. But when I clicked it open, what I saw, it wasn't love. It was humiliation. Videos of me crying. Not once or twice. Over a dozen. Different days. Different outfits. Different rooms in the house. In some of them, I was mid-breakdown, my hands shaking, my voice cracking, mascara smeared down my cheeks. In one, I was sitting on the bathroom floor, sobbing into my knees, completely unaware I was being recorded. He labeled the files. Meltdown #3. Spiral funny ending. Too much again. Classic victim vibes. My hands went cold. I couldn't breathe. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just cheating. This was cruelty. He hadn't just watched me suffer. He had archived it. Like it was a collection. Like I was his personal tragedy show. His entertainment. My worst, most private moments, recorded without my knowledge, were just content to him. A joke. A performance. Something he could revisit whenever he wanted to remind himself how much power he had over me. That was the moment I stopped being sad. I stopped being confused. I stopped asking why. I finally understood who I was dealing with. A predator. Not the kind who chases with fangs. The kind who whispers comfort while tying your wings behind your back. He didn't love me. He loved the control. He loved having front row seats to my slow unraveling. And now? Now, it was my turn to watch. After seeing those videos, those recordings of me breaking over and over, something deep inside me died. But not in the way he wanted. He had filmed my vulnerability to preserve his power. But he didn't realize that in doing so, he'd given me something invaluable. Evidence. Not just of his cruelty, but of my own strength. Because there I was, crumbling in front of his camera, and yet I was still standing. Still breathing. Still fighting to love someone who only ever wanted to study my suffering. And now? Now it was my turn to observe him. To watch him fall apart. But this wouldn't be messy. No screaming. No smashed glass. No angry confrontations. I would do what he never expected. I would take everything he built and make it collapse from the inside. Silently. Strategically. First, I made copies of everything. All the videos. The call logs. The bank statements. The messages from Ava and others I didn't even recognize. I stored it all on a drive. Hid it where he'd never find it. Then I began rebuilding. Me. Quietly. I started going for walks again, just to breathe. I called my sister for the first time in months, even though my voice trembled. I started journaling every single day, writing not just about him, but about myself, who I was before he chipped away at me. I began dressing differently, not for him, but for me. He noticed. Of course he did. Men like Daniel always notice when their favorite puppet cuts her own strings. New perfume? He asked one night, eyes narrowing. I smiled. You like it? He shrugged. It's different. Good. That was the point. Everything about me was changing, slowly, carefully, like a snake shedding its old skin. But I didn't want to just leave him. That would be too easy. Too quick. No. He needed to feel what I felt. So I gave him rope, metaphorically, and waited for him to hang himself with it. I acted sweet again. Made his coffee just right. Laughed at his dry, insincere jokes. I made him believe I had come back. He lowered his guard completely. And that's when I slipped into his world. Started logging into his business email when he left his laptop open. Started printing receipts of payments he made to people I didn't know, hotel bookings, cash transfers, even expensive gifts mailed to Ava's office. Oh yes, I found out where she worked. who she was, who all of them were. He'd been juggling multiple women like a magician who thought he'd never drop a single ball. But he didn't realize I had already stolen his wand. Once I had all the evidence, I contacted a lawyer. Not to sue. Not yet. But to prepare. Because Daniel had no idea I had been helping him manage his small business for months. All the accounting he was too lazy to handle himself. The clients I helped respond to. The invoices I organized. Yeah, they were all in my name. Because he never expected the emotional one to understand legal documents. Big mistake. So I restructured his world, slowly, silently, turning keys he forgot I had, transferring permissions he never noticed, placing breadcrumbs he couldn't trace. And still, I smiled over dinner. Still, I kissed him goodnight. Still, I let him think I was healing for him. He started bringing Ava over when he thought I was working late. Didn't realize I had installed silent cameras of my own. He thought he was clever. But while he was playing games, I was building a case. A plan. A reckoning. I contacted a few of his investors. Casually mentioned some financial irregularities I was concerned about. Didn't accuse him of anything. Just planted seeds. And seeds, when watered by suspicion, grow fast. I knew his world was built on charm, image, and ego. So that's exactly what I would target. And through it all, he still thought he'd won. Still thought I was the fragile, emotional girl crying into her pillow while he conquered the world. But that's the thing about women like me. We don't just survive. We study. We evolve. We wait. And when we strike, it's never impulsive. It's surgical. The day I was ready to begin the end, I walked into our apartment like everything was fine. Cooked dinner. Lit candles. He didn't even question it. Of course he didn't. Because he thought I had forgotten. But I hadn't. I remembered everything. Every word. Every lie. Every betrayal. And now, it was his turn to remember. I had set the table with candles, wine, and his favorite pasta. He walked in, loosened his tie, and kissed me on the forehead like a man who still believed I was his possession. And I let him. He didn't know that while he was out entertaining Ava in cheap hotel rooms, I was building the most devastating performance of my life. Not for attention. Not for drama. For justice. We sat down at the table like nothing had changed. He was talking about a new client he'd landed, flashing his signature arrogance, acting like the world bowed at his feet. I watched him carefully. Every movement. Every smirk. Every word. Like a scientist observing the final breaths of a lab experiment. "How was your day?" he asked. "It was productive," I said softly, sipping the wine I had poured only for myself. He raised an eyebrow. "You didn't pour me any?" I smiled. "You'll want to keep a clear head." He laughed. "What's that supposed to mean?" I leaned forward, gently placing a plain white envelope on his plate. He looked at it, confused. "What's this?" "Proof," I said. He opened it slowly, pulled out the stack of photographs. Screenshots. Legal printouts. Transaction records. And then his face changed. That smugness? Gone. Replaced by confusion. Then alarm. Then denial. "What the hell is this?" "That's Ava," I said calmly. "And Sarah. And Nina. And the other four you thought I didn't know about." He opened his mouth, but I raised my hand. "I'm not done." He paused, blinking like a deer caught in headlights. I slid a second folder across the table. "This one's fun. It's everything you've ever sent from your business email, including the invoices you altered, the deals you took cash for off the record, and the funds you misused." He stared at the folder like it might explode. "I don't. What are you talking about?" "Oh, Daniel," I said, tilting my head. "You really should have paid more attention to who set up your financial system, or who filed your taxes, or who had access to the client portals." He pushed back from the table. You're insane. No, I said, standing slowly. I'm prepared. I picked up the drive from the table, held it between two fingers. This has every video you ever took of me without consent. The ones you laughed at. The ones you labeled like a monster. His face turned pale. I leaned in close, just enough for him to feel the ice in my words. You thought I was your little puppet. The sad girl you could study, manipulate, record, and discard. You thought pain made me weak. I straightened, voice calm, but colder than he had ever heard. But pain didn't break me, Daniel. It built me. He lunged for the drive. I stepped back. Try it, I said. Touch me now, and I hit send. He froze. I have copies in 3 locations. One goes to your investors. One to the police. And one, my favorite, to a journalist I met last week. You know, the one who's been dying to do an exposé on emotional abuse in startup culture. He sank into his chair like the air had been ripped from his lungs. What do you want? He whispered. Nothing, I said. Not anymore. He blinked like he didn't understand. You're free, I said. Free to face everything you thought I'd never be strong enough to show the world. I walked to the door and picked up my bag. I've already moved out. My name's been removed from every shared account. You'll find a lawyer's letter on your desk outlining the termination of my involvement in your business. Oh, and the lease? It's in my name. You have 3 days to vacate or I file for eviction. His mouth opened, but no words came. Just stunned, choking silence. I looked back one last time. You once said I was your whole life, I said. Turns out I was. And now, you have nothing. I didn't slam the door when I left. I didn't need to. The silence behind me was louder than any goodbye I could have screamed. Outside, the city pulsed like a heartbeat I had forgotten I had. I breathed in the cold night air and felt clean for the first time in months. The weight was gone. The fog had lifted. And in its place, power. Not the kind that controls others. The kind that comes from reclaiming yourself. He had watched every tear fall like it was entertainment. But now? Now he would watch everything crumble. And every time he tried to smile again, every time he laughed, flirted, charmed, he'd remember my eyes. The last thing he saw before his perfect illusion shattered. They say the most dangerous woman is the one who learns how to breathe on her own. And that's exactly what I did. After I left Daniel behind, after I dismantled his empire of illusions brick by brick, I didn't run into anyone's arms. No rebound. No quick fix. No romantic closure. Because this wasn't about healing through someone else. This was about returning to me. The version of me that existed before him. The one with dreams that didn't shrink to fit inside his approval. The one who used to laugh without glancing at his face for permission. I spent the first week alone in a quiet Airbnb outside the city. No phone. No noise. Just me, a journal, and a window that faced the sunrise. And in that silence, I cried. Not because I missed him, but because I finally missed myself. The girl who used to sing in the kitchen. The one who danced barefoot in the living room when no one was watching. The woman who once believed in softness without being punished for it. I wrote letters I never planned to send. Letters to the girl I had been. To the woman I was becoming. To the ghosts of all the versions of me that tried to survive him. And then, slowly, I built something new. I updated my resume. Signed up for a night course in psychology, something I'd always wanted to do before I let his dreams swallow mine. I started posting my own content online. Raw, real, unapologetic. People listened. Women reached out. And what started as a whisper became a wildfire. I began speaking publicly, sharing my story not as a victim, but as a survivor. A strategist. A woman who had studied pain, mapped it, and then weaponized it to walk herself out of hell. One night, I gave a small talk at a local women's center. I stood at the front, nervous, trembling, but alive. And when I said the words, "You are not too emotional. You are just too open in a world that punishes honesty," something inside me clicked. I was no longer the girl Daniel filmed breaking down in a dark apartment. I was no longer the woman begging for love from someone who only took. I was reborn. He tried to write my story like a tragedy. But I took the pen back. And when I did, I didn't just rewrite the ending. I changed the entire genre. He saw me as fragile, delicate, easy to crack. But what he didn't realize is that glass, once shattered, can be reforged into a blade. And I became sharp, too sharp for him to ever hold again. A few months later, I saw him, by accident, in a cafe downtown. He looked smaller somehow, not in size, but in presence. Like someone who had once filled every room, now barely registered as a whisper in mine. He looked up. Our eyes met. And for a moment, I saw it, the flicker of recognition. Not just of who I was, but of what he had lost. What he had tried to destroy, only to realize he had simply released it. He opened his mouth to speak, but I just smiled, gently, distantly, and walked past. Because what would I even say? What could I possibly give to a man who once drank my tears like wine and only realized they were poison when I stopped pouring? I didn't need revenge anymore. Because I was the revenge. My peace. My power. My voice. They were louder than any scream I ever gave him. And the best part? He'd never be brave enough to love the woman I had become. Because this version of me, this fire-forged, emotionally fearless, unapologetically powerful woman, she was never meant for men like Daniel. She was meant for something bigger. For herself. It started with a single post. A small clip from one of the talks I gave. Just a moment where I said, "You don't have to be loud to be powerful. You just have to be clear about who you are no longer willing to be." It wasn't planned. It wasn't strategic. I just wanted to share something real. But within hours, that clip exploded. Comments flooded in. Some whispered, "I thought I was the only one." Others said, "Your story is mine, word for word." I just never knew how to name it. And then came the waves. Messages from women. From men. From survivors. From people still trapped inside rooms like the ones I used to sit in, quiet, numb, and believing that being destroyed was the same as being loved. I realized I had cracked something open. Not just in me, but in them. My inbox became a graveyard of stories waiting to be resurrected. One by one, they came forward. One by one, they stopped apologizing. Stopped asking if their pain was real enough. Stopped blaming themselves for bleeding in someone else's war. And with every voice that joined the storm, Daniel's silence grew louder. I had never named him publicly. I didn't need to. But people like him always expose themselves when the truth begins to rise. Soon, whispers about his business practices started circulating. Former partners began speaking out. Old clients revisited their contracts and realized how much they'd been manipulated. One woman, Ava, reached out to me privately. I didn't expect it. I hesitated before replying. But something told me this wasn't about drama. So, I met her. She was quiet, nervous. But when she looked at me, she said, "He did it to me too." I just didn't know it had a name. We talked for hours. And in that conversation, I realized something powerful. Abuse doesn't always come with bruises. Sometimes, it comes wrapped in charm. In roses. In I love yous. It comes with soft touches and sharp words. And when we don't talk about it, it wins. So we talked. We organized. We created a forum, a safe space for stories like ours. And what began as healing for one became revolution for many. Women from all over the country started sharing their truths. Anonymous at first. Then boldly. Openly. No more shame. No more silence. The movement grew. And suddenly, people were watching. reporters, therapists, policymakers. What Daniel tried to erase became a headline. What he tried to mock became a cause. And somewhere in the middle of it all, I smiled. Because I hadn't just reclaimed my power. I had passed the spark to others. And they were setting the world on fire with truth. A year after I left him, I received a letter. Unmarked. No return address. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. Inside was a note written in sharp, anxious handwriting. I saw you on the news. You said everything I never let myself admit. I hope you're proud of what you've done. You should be. Him. No name. But I knew. Oh, I knew. And for a moment, I let myself feel it. Not joy. Not vengeance. Closure. Because he was right. I was proud. Not just of what I had done, but of who I had become. He had turned my heart into a stage. Laughed while I collapsed behind the curtain. But now I stood at the front of that same stage, spotlight blazing, voice steady, eyes clear, and said, "This is not a performance. This is survival. And survival is sacred." I used to believe closure came from confrontation, from dramatic final words, from a tear-filled showdown, from saying everything I had bottled up inside. But the truth? Closure doesn't come from shouting. It comes from silence. The kind that doesn't beg to be understood. The kind that simply walks away and stays gone. Daniel still exists somewhere out there. Still wears the same smile. Still talks too loudly. Still tells stories like he's the hero. But the world no longer claps for him like it used to. The women? They know now. His clients? They ask questions. His name, once said with respect, now carries a shadow. And me? I never needed to destroy him to win. I just needed to remove him from my narrative. And that's exactly what I did. I remember the last dream I had about him. It wasn't a nightmare. It was quiet. We stood in a hallway, two ghosts brushing past each other. He looked at me, eyes hollow, searching. He reached out, said my name. But in the dream, I didn't speak. I just smiled and walked away. And when I woke up, there were no tears. Just peace. Because I finally understood. He never had the final word. He never held the pen. He was never the author. I was. I had written my chapters with pain, yes. But I rewrote them with purpose. And that final chapter? It didn't end with him. It ended with me, standing in front of a room of strangers, telling my story not with bitterness, but with fire. It ended with my voice steady, my heart open, and my past behind glass where it could no longer touch me. He had his version. His twisted script where I was the fragile girl begging for his love. But mine? Mine was the truth. The unfiltered, unedited, unapologetic truth. And truth doesn't need a dramatic ending. It just needs to be spoken. Sometimes, I get messages from people asking, "Don't you wish you could go back and warn yourself?" And the honest answer? No. Because that girl, naive, hopeful, open, she deserved to live. Even if it meant she had to break. Because the woman I became was forged in that fire. And I love her too much to erase the pain that made her. One day, I walked past the old apartment. The one we shared. The one where he filmed me crying. The one where I gave him everything and got nothing in return. It was empty now. For sale. Windows dark. Just a building. No ghosts left. I stood across the street for a moment and said nothing. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood there and felt nothing. And that was the victory. He'll tell people I was too sensitive, that I overreacted, that I was dramatic. Let him. Because while he spins stories to avoid accountability, I stand in rooms filled with survivors who no longer hide. I get letters from girls who left toxic love after hearing my voice. I see women walking taller, breathing deeper, trusting themselves again. That's the ripple he'll never undo. That's the legacy he'll never rewrite. And every time he opens his mouth to laugh, every time he thinks the world has forgotten, he'll feel it. My eyes. The last thing he saw before the mask shattered. The last truth he could never unsee. The final cut. Because in the end, he thought he was the director, the one calling the shots. But I was the editor. And I ended it without a word, without a scream, without a single tear left to give. Just a silence so deafening. He'll never hear himself the same way again.